Welcome to today's Coffee and Crafts. We're going to be looking at polymer clay. So today's mug is particularly special to me. This is from Breakfast at Mickey's at Walt Disney World. My mom swiped it 25 years ago when we went to Disney World for the first time. And every time I see it, it brings back that memory of meeting Mickey and Donald and having breakfast with my family. So this is one of my favorite coffee mugs. I know I say that a lot, but this one here is really, really special. Here's a look at some of the tools that we're going to be using today. We're mostly going to be working with Sculpey or Superculpey. I have a bunch of tools to work with. A lot of these are actually dental tools or wood carving tools. And then I actually have some clay tools from the pottery studio. These all could come in handy. Another thing I have is some wire. This is great for making armatures, or if you need your piece to be particularly tough, having a little bit of wire inside is really helpful. Some eye hooks or eye pins, so we can make these into some charms and have them dangle. And some really, really special oven baked clay. This Primo clay, which has sparkles and metallics in it, and it looks really cool. This here is Superculpey Original. This is my favorite polymer clay to work with. It comes in the skin tone or flesh tone or peach color. It's perfect for working with because when it's cold, it's very hard and stiff, and you know, you can get a lot of shape with it and little details, but when you warm it up with your hands, it's also very moldable and it keeps its shape. So this is what I'm going to be using to start with. My plan today is to make some charms. So what you're going to want to do is actually warm up the clay with your hands. If you look at first, it's pretty hard to kind of get together, and it takes a lot of work, but once you warm it up with your hands, it's quite moldable after that, and you can really get some good detail in it. So the first thing we're going to do is warm this up. Okay, so I've warmed up my clay, and now I'm looking at some ideas that I have for charms that I could be making. I'm really into honeydukes from Harry Potter right now, and these are some of the drawings I've done of things I would like to have for either charms on a bag, or I'd like to create a miniature version of the shop. So these are some of the things I would need. The first thing I'm going to start with is pretty simple, just one of those spiral lollipops that you see at a lot of candy stores. So what I'm going to do is kind of create myself a snake out of the clay. I'm going to start out small and get bigger as they go. I'm going to make one end a little bit smaller than the rest, and then kind of do the spiral out. And then what I'm going to do is actually make the spiral where I twist it. There we go, and I'm going to kind of flatten it out on both sides. And then like put this off to the side and make another one. There's another one. After I've made a few, we'll come back and I'll show you the next thing I'm going to work on. I've made myself a few different sized lollipops. Now I'm going to do some beans, like the Bertie Bott's every flavored beans. And I'm going to do them in a couple of sizes and use a few different tools to do that. So first thing you're going to want to do is create sort of your bean. Now, one of the best things about the beans is kind of the little curve shape they have, and what you can do is use different size round items to curve them around. So depending on the shape of your bean, you can use different little paint brushes, markers, whatever, to build around and kind of get the bean shape you're looking for. And then just use your finger to kind of take away any sharp edges. So that's one bean sort of done. Now I'm going to make a couple of different sizes, so that's obviously a really big one, but you can do really, really small as well. Like, I'm going to want to put some in maybe like a little jar, so I'm going to roll this around the best I can. Get it nice and smooth, round, and then I'm going to use maybe the smallest part I can find, which would be on the end of this right here. And I'm going to make my bean shape using that. Again, use my fingers to kind of take away any hard edges. Just kind of smooth out anything you need smoothed. Yeah, so really, really tiny bean. Now if you can find some toothpicks or something, you can go really small. So I'm gonna make a bunch more beans and show you when we get back. As you can see here, I made a ton of different beans in all different sizes. So Bertie bots are kind of one of my favorites. Okay, now we're going to be using some of the colored clay, Sculpey, to make one of my most favorite of the Harry Potter candies, and that is a chocolate frog. And I actually have some reference. This is a prop replica of the chocolate frog and a clay frog that I made. So we're going to use these as reference as I sculpt a frog. You can see he's pretty cute. Alright, let's get started. I took the two different colored clays, these two here, and mixed them together and used the heat from my hands to warm it up to get a pretty moldable piece of clay here. So the next thing I'm going to do is start making my frog. So this is going to be on a keychain, so it's going to be a little bit smaller than the two I have currently. So first I'm just going to figure out approximate shapes. I now have all the pieces that I'm going to need to put this frog together. I have 2 of everything, so 1 for each side. So now it's time for assembly. So what I'm actually doing is taking these snakes here and scoring them. So I'm cutting up the end where it's going to attach, and the same thing on one of the balls. I'm cutting up where I want it to attach, and that just helps make the clay stick together better and attach better, so when it's finished it doesn't kind of like fall off or fall apart. So hold on, let's see if we can get this in focus. Yeah, so as you can see I have it all scored. Same thing with the snake of clay at the same spot, and then I'm kind of joining them together. And that's how you really get them to stick. And of course you're going to want to smooth this out. And this is what you're going to want to do for all the pieces and all the parts that you saw. I did it for the legs and the arms on the frog. Now I'm doing it for all the toes as best as I can, and then I want to get the top really round. One of the things I think is the most cute about frogs, or the chocolate frogs, is how round their toes are. So once I got that done, I'm going to do the same thing for all the other toes that the frog's going to have. Okay, so the next step is going to be taking our toes and kind of like joining them together so that we can put them on the frog. So I'm going to use my little tool here and kind of at least score it a little bit. Okay, and what I'm going to do is put all of the toes together in kind of the shape I'm looking for. I'm going to use my tool to kind of bring it together and smooth it out the way I want. There we are. We have one foot, so now what I'm going to do is make the other ones. I now have all of the feet done, and what I'm going to do is attach it to my frog using the same technique. That's one leg on. Now I'm going to put the rest on. Okay, so I have all of the feet and toes and arms and everything is attached. The last thing I'm going to do is look at putting some eyes on him. Thinking these are a little bit too big, so I might cut them down just a little bit. And then sculpting in some detail onto the nose, and then he will be all done. Okay, now that we have the frog all done, I'm going to make some extra goodies before we go into the next part, which is baking your clay. So I'll see you when I'm finished making those. Alright, so I have a lot of charms made, a lot of different pieces, and the next step is going to be to bake them. Now it's better to bake on a lower temperature for a longer amount of time. That means you're less likely to burn your piece, to have cracks or pieces fall off. So the next step is going to be getting all of these pieces onto some parchment paper and then into the oven. Okay, so you're going to want to preheat your oven before you put your pieces in. I'm doing 250 for 15 minutes, and then I will check on it every 5 minutes after that to make sure it doesn't burn. Okay. Gotta be really careful not to knock things over, because of course they will stick to each other. Alright, now we wait. So I've taken all the pieces out of the oven and I've separated them into things that are finished and don't need to be painted, and the things over here that need to be painted. So what I'm going to do is put these away and start painting these ones over here. Okay, so I've done a bunch of painting and I'm going to show you the next step with some of the pieces I painted here, and then also with the chocolate frog we were working on. So one of the pieces I created was a miniature pumpkin juice bottle. So as you can see here, I have the reference, and here's the piece I painted. I actually made a few of them, so now what we're going to do is glaze them so that the paint does not scratch off. Because right now, just being the acrylic paint on there, it could come off very easily. So what I'm actually going to do is use some UV resin and a little container, and I'm going to paint that onto my bottles here. I'm just doing a thin coat, and then I'm going to hit it with the UV light. Now I'm going to do this for all the bottles, and we'll be back once I'm finished that. Another thing you can do with the UV resin is make certain spots you want shiny. This cake here has a matte finish from the polymer clay, same with the frog. Now if I wanted to make the frog and say the icing look like it's wet, shiny, melted, I can then put on some of the UV resin, and that will help create that shiny effect. Once I have it all painted, I'm going to use the UV light to harden it. As you can see, when I move the light around, the icing is nice and shiny, the strawberry is very reflective, but the cake part stays matte. So I'm going to do that with the cake and with the frog. And that's it, we're all finished. As you can see, I have a nice shiny coat on the frog here. The paint on the bottles won't come off, and I have a shiny icing. So that's it. And that's it for today's coffee and crafts. I'll see you guys next time.